Does everybody have the text? Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, Shana Tova, everyone. Close now, so we can start. Let's start by saying together a blessing for studying words of Torah. Please join me when we say together.
Eloheinu melech haolam.
So we're going to try and teach together, Dr. David Fink and myself, about the rabbinic idea of building a template to an ideal community, to an ideal society, to an ideal people in a way, after a horrible destruction. And Dr. Fink asked me to say something about the destruction and not to assume that everybody knows Jewish history by heart. So I will say that the texts that we will see are from two stages of the post-destruction era. In the year 70 CE, the year 70 to the Common Era, the temple in Jerusalem is destroyed by the Romans. Jerusalem is destroyed and Judea is destroyed. Now, there's one thing that is very important to remember about this destruction, both according to outside sources. So it's not only the way the rabbis are telling the story in rabbinical sources. Part of the destruction was a civil war between different fractions, different segments of the Jewish community. According to the Talmud, there was horrible famine in Jerusalem that was caused because the different groups of Jews inside Jerusalem were burning the supplies of food of each other. So it was a self-inflicted famine because according to the Babylonian Talmud, to the Tractate of Gittin, there was enough food there for decades and decades. There was plenty of food, but Jews were burning each other's food, and that caused the total destruction. The rabbis are escaping, burning Jerusalem, and going to a place called Yavne. By the way, still a city in Israel, a really nice suburb with nice homes, not far from the Mediterranean. Not a bad place to reside, Yavne. And then, after the rebellion, the failed rebellion of Bar Kokhba in the 2nd century, also Yavne is destroyed. And all the rabbis have to escape to the Galilee. Those two destructions, in the eyes of the rabbis, we don't have to agree, are self-inflicted destructions. It's because of zealotry that drove us into that destruction. And the rabbis, not just as an answer to that, but also they see it as an opportunity to build an ideal community, to build an ideal society. And what's interesting for us, at least here, is not to talk about the destruction, but to talk about the ideals for the Jewish community according to our rabbinical tradition. And the last thing that I want to say, and then I want David to speak, and then hopefully we'll read a few texts, is the key word there is a word in Hebrew that is very hard to translate. That they wanted to build a world that is based on chesed. Chesed is a word that means loving kindness, compassion, and caring, all in one word. So they want to build a world that is based on chesed and not a world that is based on justice. That they actually, we could have read hundreds of texts. That there are so many texts on this ideal of the rabbis that they thought that justice is actually destructive because they've seen what societies that are filled with the idea that I know what justice is. And when I am filled with my justice, it borders on self-righteousness, and it borders on the fact that I'm not willing to listen to your justice. I don't care about what you have to say. I'm sorry that I'm pointing at you. I don't care what you have to say, because anything that contradicts my justice is less than pure justice. And then we stop listening to one another. So their ideal was a society of chesed, of loving kindness and caring, that is built on pluralism and diversity and the ability to listen to one another and be in dialogue with one another and do something that is almost, I'm not sure that we're even capable in doing anymore. Actually, listen and change your mind, because that you actually find reason in what the other person has to say. That's the kind of the society that they wanted to. That's why I want to say, please, and then we'll read them.
Thank you. And I was intimidated but honored that Rabbi David asked me to join him for this conversation. And I'm really going to have two main themes as we talk today. One is as a psychologist who believes very much in the importance of identity and of the self, and how we move through the world as we see ourselves and as we connect to others. But then also through my role at JFCS as a social services agency, which is really the vision of which is helping to build a community and a community of mutual support. And so we'll talk through those pieces, both in terms of trauma and reactions to trauma, and also identity. And I'll pull in some recent research on American Judaism and financial insecurity and food insecurity in the Jewish community and the impact of that. And will all, in my mind, ties in a loving way and in a very aligned way with Rabbi David's sermon this morning, as well as last night, and the notion of this new program that several of us are pushing, and we hope that many of you will join us in a year of civil discourse and join as in the November training on being somebody who learns how to engage in conversation in a way that encourages more conversation, not winning an argument, but encourages conversation.
So I want us to go to the first text, and I really apologize. I know that most of us probably don't care where this text comes from. I spent 7 years in undergraduate and graduate school on those texts, so I cannot resist that. It's from Avot Rabbi Natan, which is a commentary to Avot, which is the ethics of our ancestors. So at the ethics of our ancestors, we read what Shir Chadash likes to sing a lot, that the world is built on 3 pillars: ala Torah, ala avodah, ve'al gemilut chasadim. On Torah, on ritual and study, and on acts of love and kindness. And this is a commentary to that. So Avot Rabbi Natan is kind of like the Talmud to the Mishnah of Avot. There is no Talmud to Avot. That's what we have. So I want us to read it and to ask ourselves, what is a world that is based on love and kindness there, and what is the example for a world that is based on chesed, on love and kindness? And also, it's a pretty radical statement here. So also, what's radical there? Is there almost everybody closed their camera, but Susan, you forgot to do that. So would you be our reader of this text?
On acts of kindness, how so? It says, for I desire kindness, not a well-being offering. The world was created from the very beginning with kindness, as it says, for I have said that the world will be built on kindness, and the heavens will be established on your faith. Once Rabban, our Rabbi, Yochanan ben Zakkai, left Jerusalem, and Rabbi Yehoshua followed after him, and he saw the holy temple destroyed. Rabbi Yehoshua said, "Woe to us, for this is destroyed. The place where all of Israel's sins are forgiven via the bringing of sacrifices." Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "My son, do not be distressed, for we have a form of atonement just like it. And what is it? Acts of kindness, as it says, for I desire kindness, not a well-being offering."
Somebody wants to say something, David?
I will start. When I think about this this tract, what comes to me is thinking about a society and the damage that occurs to a society under assault. And I think about, and we have examples of it now, where we have, as Rabbi David talks about, going, every time he goes to Israel, they're still playing constant interviews of individuals who are re-experiencing the trauma of October 7th, so that the country itself is re-experiencing that trauma. Mm-hmm. And you see it in the United States as well, in the political divide, where the conversation about even the government shutting down, for example, that has just happened, is very much about what one side is doing to the other, and not about where we're going. Mm-hmm. And so that's on the societal piece. What will come up soon as you talk about the individual, there's a notion in trauma, when somebody has experienced trauma, there is damage to that individual. By definition, that is damage. And in my years of training many, many moons ago, trauma was damaging, and that was the end of the conversation. And the question was, how do you mitigate the impact of trauma? But we know now from research that actually there's something called post-traumatic growth, where trauma, if it is dealt with in the correct way, there are scars. If those scars we can still be stronger as individuals. And I think we can be stronger as a society if we deal with the conflict. So I think that comes to my mind about that.
So I want to build on that, if that's okay. I think that in the text, we see the growth of the conflict between being stuck in the trauma and the growth. So Rabbi Yeshua is still in the trauma. This is the generation that actually left Jerusalem, that they left burning Jerusalem and the burning temple. I mean, they went through something horrific, maybe the most horrific event in our entire history. The magnitude can only be compared to the Holocaust. It's not just something in most of us lifetime. And Rabbi Yoshua is still there. He's still mourning that. And Rabbi Yochanan is actually already beyond that. And the radical statement here, and that's where I see what you've said, is he's not saying, okay, so as a result of this trauma, what we need to do is to create an alternative. They're saying this is what the world was supposed to do. When God created the world, God did not want sacrifice. They quote Hosea, and they're saying, to begin with, take all of Leviticus and a lot of Numbers and some of Genesis and some of Exodus and some of Deuteronomy, no offense to Joanna, and throw it to put it someplace. Don't throw it, but put it someplace. It's not relevant to us anymore. This is not our world. A lot of the most common commandment in the entire Hebrew Bible is about sacrifices. It appears more than 250 times. The number 2, which is Shabbat, is 176, just to give you the difference. So they're saying all this is nonsense. Well, not nonsense, I'm sorry. All this is not what it meant to be. And they're quoting the prophet, and they're saying the world should have been a world of chesed, of loving kindness to begin with. So it's not that we're reacting to the trauma. We're growing back to where we should have been to begin with. We're looking at it as an opportunity of growth.
Rabbi.
Yes, I got in trouble.
No. I was just thinking that, the word chesed, I was really thinking about that again, how difficult it is to translate, and that often now in Torah study we don't translate it anymore. So we're beginning to get a sense of what it really means. And you, in your sermon, evoked the name of Hoover, who is one of my reviewed rabbis in my mind, because I never met him. But Hoover, and I think what you said was wonderful about that, he translated chesed with a German word, because he was German and wrote in German most of his works. He translated it with a word called devotion, which in English would be devotion or dedication. And I think I want to add that to your word kindness. I think kindness is a fine word. I mean, I have no objection to it, and you will maybe want to add that. But it means that you are dedicated to what you said, with the other person that is in your that you meet, whoever it is. It doesn't have to be, it can't always be a friend. It could be an enemy. It could be, someone that revolts you because they are so poor or so sick and they look so awful. But that is who we are dedicated to. So I wanted to just add that this is not a criticism, and it's not anything about it.
Yes, Marty.
I think I relate this to the Haftarah that Rabbi Matt read to me. Is this the fact that I desire?
Isaiah 58.
I think what it's saying here is that, with the temple, we had all this ritual. And people said, if I do the ritual, I could kind of do anything else because I've gone through the ritual.
Yeah.
They're saying now there is no temple, there's no ritual. We got to focus on maybe what this was supposed to be all along, which was the acts of kindness, as opposed to just worldly going through ritual.
So think of the audacity, the chutzpah of the rabbis, and the courage of the rabbis, that they take the only prophecy that there is in the entire Bible that speaks against fasting, and they say that's what you're going to read on Yom Kippur. I mean, it's like unbelievable that they want us to actually question ourselves. That is the rituals that we're doing, does that count, or is it something else that needs to count? I want to use what Johanna said actually, and I want us to go to the next text. It's okay, are we okay? So the next text is from the Tosefta Eduyot. Now, Eduyot is a Mishnah. There is an Eduyot in the Mishnah in the 6 books that came right after post-biblical writings, rabbinical writing before the Talmud. There's also Talmud Eduyot, and there's also Tosefta. What is Tosefta? 3rd century Rabbi Yehuda, the leader of the rabbis, Yehuda Nasi, is collecting and editing the Mishnah. When you edit, you have to leave some outside. So immediately the other rabbis are creating the Tosefta. Everything that he left outside of it, they're putting in. Like, who do you think you are to tell us that is important and that is not important? We are just as capable of making the decision. Eduyot, it's my favorite Mishnah in Tosefta because it speaks about the rabbinical process. It's not about laws that have to do with us. It's all about what happened between the rabbis. And I want us to read this beautiful Tosefta and to ask ourselves, what are the rabbis afraid of? And what is the antidote to what they're afraid of? What is the Torah that is important to them? to the rabbis. What's the Torah that is the most important Torah for them? Arlene, do you want to read? You're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay. I think so. Can you hear? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. When the sages entered the vineyard in Yanach, they said, in the future, there will come an hour when a person seeks a teaching from the teachings of the Torah, and he will not find it, or in this teaching of the scribes, and he will not find it, as it says, behold, days are coming, says the Lord, etc. They will seek me out, the word of God, and they will not find it. Amos. The word of God refers to prophecy. The word of God refers to the end of days. The word of God, so that there shall not be one word of Torah similar in its fellow. They said, let us begin from Hillel and Shammai.
So what are they afraid of? What is really the rabbinical nightmare according to this Tosefta? It's for everyone, not just for Arlene.
Thank you.
Disappear.
That things are not written. You're not allowed to write it. So what will happen to all the teachings? And they're quoting Amos, who says, one day you will look for the Torah and you won't find it. It won't be there. Okay, so that's their nightmare. And then comes this unbelievable statement. So they're saying, okay, so we need to put it down on writing so it will be preserved. And what do we need to preserve? Where will we begin? Hillel and Shammai. What is Hillel and Shammai?
They never agreed.
It's the arguments. That's the most important Torah. They're saying something amazing. The most important Torah is not what I have to say because I'm always right. The most important Torah is the arguments when we don't agree with one another. That it could not be a more pluralistic and diverse, except for what we'll see in text 4, that is even more. But this is like, we want to preserve the dialogue of this agreement, because that's the most important part of our Torah. I don't think that any of us would have come with that, by the way. Seriously, I don't think that anyone except for these rabbis would have come with such radical notion of pluralism and diversity, as they are saying. What we really are afraid that those moments when we were in controversy, when we did mediations, because we won't get to it. There's a lot of texts here, and if you're not in person, you can email me and I'll send you all the texts. There are a lot of texts here about how many compromises they had to do in order to continue to live together. So all this society that was in constant controversy but found a way to live, that's the most important to us. Not the laws, not the mitzvot, but a world where we can have coexistence between people who don't agree with each other. That's the Torah that we're afraid that will be lost. By the way, they might be right. It might be a little bit missing.
Well, and I'm really, if I can step in, I'm really struck by the courage of the rabbis here, because if we think about our own lives, when we come into a moment of insecurity, of not feeling like we know an answer, we want to revert back to something concrete. We always want to go back to the concrete. And so it would be very easy for the rabbis to go back to the law and focus on the laws, because that tells us go from A to B to C to D. And that gives us structure, and that makes us feel more comfortable as people. We don't, as an individual, when we don't know who we are and what our road is, we fall back into that which is what there's a saying, you fall into that which is familial and familiar.
Yeah.
And what the rabbis are doing here is having the courage to say, we don't need
to have these concrete explanations. We need to have a way of being, which is we can live in a world of gray if we know how to interact with each other and how to be meaningful with each other, which again is a very, in theory of personality development, the connectedness to an other is very key. And so I think I really enjoy that for that reason.
Yes.
It sounds like we're being told to be open-minded and to be teachable, to have these conversations and with the attitude of maybe the other person is right, but at least be open-minded. That's what I think they're saying.
So, there's a rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda in the Ethics of Our Ancestors that says, all my life I grew between sages. And at first, the first time I read it, I misunderstood it, and I thought that what he says, that the reason that he grew in Torah was that he spent his life studying with all those scholars, and he learned and he learned and he learned. But then you see that he actually was a student of two rabbis that never agreed with one another, of Rav and Shmuel. There was two rabbis that always argue in the Talmud. They were of different houses of learning. And then you understand that actually what he said is, all my life I grew in between, in the cracks that are between those two rabbis. And actually what he's trying to say to us, if you're a student of a rabbi, at best, you will grow to be as tall as that rabbi, as big in Torah as that rabbi. But if you're not a student just of one rabbi, if you are a student of two rabbis that don't agree with one another, then you can grow above them, because then you can grow by yourself. And actually, I think that that's what they want, that we will grow from the fact that we don't agree with one another. When we just hear an echo chamber of ourselves, that's not a good thing for growth. When we just get to hear our own opinion, and in our lives, that's a big issue in our lives. But I want to stick to the text and not to my grievances on our society.
We only have an hour, so.
So the third text is actually on Dr. Fink's request. I was willing to let go of that, but he thought that it's important, so we'll let him lead a discussion over that. It's a very long text where you see Carol Penner is hiding behind her camera, but where you see the three dots, Carol always tells me that she wants the text between those that we're skipping. So it's 2 pages, this thing that we're every student. What happens is that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the same rabbi we read about, his son dies, and his students come to comfort him. That's the first line when it says, and we have every student trying to comfort him, and they all fail until one rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, comes and succeeds. So we're going to read what happened there, and then we're going to read not that great ending of the story that is not about the rabbi, but it's about the students. By the way, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he's the founder of the Bet Midrash in Yavne, of the rabbinical project. And there are beautiful descriptions, mainly in the Ethics of Our Ancestors in Pirkei Avot, but not only about his students and the relationship between him and his students. He had a whole thing as a teacher and as a rabbi of other rabbis there. But let's read it. Susan, do you want to read it again, please?
When Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai's son died, his students came in to comfort him. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah came in. When Rabbi Yochanan saw him, he said to his steward, "Take this vessel and follow me to the bathhouse, because this is a great man, and I will not be able to withstand him." When they all left, Elazar said, "I am going to Damasit, a beautiful place with good, sweet water." They said, We will go to Yavne, a place where there is an abundance of scholars who love the Torah. So he went to Damasit, the beautiful place with good sweet water, and his reputation in Torah study diminished. And they went to Yavne, the place where there was an abundance of scholars who all loved the Torah, and their reputations in Torah study grew.
So just to explain before David takes it further, what happens is this great student, he's the best student. He is the student that the rabbi, when he comes, he says, I have to get up in front of him. Now, the rules of being polite is, maybe I shouldn't tell it here, is that the students get up for the rabbi. Okay, the rabbi gets to sit and the students to honor him. I went to school 1 year in London when I was a ninth grader. My parents were on sabbatical. We had to get up every time the teacher went in. I don't know.
They do for all teachers, not just.
Yes, for every teacher, we had to get up for them. In Israel, you never get up for any teacher. He is such a great student that the rabbi gets up for him. And he says the only one who succeeds in saying something meaningful is him. And then what happens? He goes, there's another version, I didn't have the guts to bring it because I knew that Joanna might be here, that his wife tells him to go to Damsit because there's nice water there. So he decides to go to Florida. He decides to go to Florida or to whatever you decide, but not to a place where there are students of Torah. And what happens? He diminishes and diminishes in Torah, and they grow more and more. So what can we learn from that?
So the reason I wanted Rabbi David to include this is I think of when I read this, I think about the impact of grief and trauma on individuals. And one of the things that happens oftentimes is that we have a desire to retreat when we have a tremendous loss or we have a tremendous trauma. And we withdraw, again, similar to the conversation at the rabbi's sermon of it's almost the opposite of if somebody does to me, I'm going to do to them. Somebody has done to me, therefore I'm going to retreat from everyone. And what happens here as the rabbi retreats? We don't know anything about his teaching. But you have the other rabbi, Ben Zakkai, who goes to him and goes to him and tries to connect with him. And all of his students connect with Ben Zakkai, and Ben Zakkai then goes to Yavne, and now he has a baby Midrash. And I think for me, what it speaks to as well is the significance of how dangerous it is for an individual to be allowed to retreat into themselves in the face of trauma or grief. And the opposite of that, which is that as a community, what do we want to do for each other when somebody near us is in grief and trauma? And the power of having a community that supports each other and connects to each other.
Yeah, people isolate.
Right. So try not to, people do isolate. And how do we keep them? How do we draw them out?
And I think that the rabbis are, it's not in contradiction, but I think that the rabbis are actually saying that you cannot learn Torah on your own. You cannot just close yourself in the library and learn Torah on your own. You need a counterpart to argue with you. You need someone to be on your side, kind of disagreeing, but also agreeing and helping you to study. And you cannot create a community of Torah students without having Torah students, without having sages together.
And you can't have a disagreement without a relationship. Right? So I mean, it's right here's this Torah that has 613 rules. That's all about relationships.
So we got to the fourth text. I have to admit that that's my favorite text. this is the destruction after the destruction. So if you think of the trauma, the second temple was destroyed, Jerusalem was destroyed, Judea was destroyed, they all go to Yavne. And then also the area of Yavne is destroyed and they have to move to Galilee. And it's already the remains of what was in Yavne. Not everybody made it. A lot of them were killed by the Romans in this second rebellion of Bar Kokhba. So they go to a place called Usha. So we're now at the second and the third century CE to the Common Era, where they have to rebuild a community that went through destructions twice. Okay, it's horrific to read about it, and it's real history. This is our history. So they go through a second destruction, and now what are we going to do? How are we going to rebuild? Are we going to build the same thing, or are we going to build something else? So I wanted to ask us, how are they doing it? What's the post-traumatic growth, to use your term, that we see in this text from what we had in Yavne, what we had prior, that community that had the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai, and they kept arguing and never agreeing with one another. So what is the next stage to even, if I may say, a more ideal community in the rabbinical arms? What's the difference between Hillel and Shammai? What are the rabbis doing here? Susan, do you want to read some more? Nobody there is willing to come to help you. Arlene, you'll get. You know what, Arlene? Why won't you read that, and Susan will read the next one, please, Arlene.
I got my glasses now. At the end of the persecution, our teachers gathered at Usha, and these are they: Rabbi Judah, Rabbi Nehemiah, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Simeon, for Yai, Rabbi Eliezer, ben Rabbi Yosef the Galilean, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Jacob.
So I'll stop you there for a minute, Arlene. So this is like, it is so sad, or it's supposed to be so sad, because first thing that they're saying to us is that after the Shmad, which is actually a stronger word in the Hebrew than just persecution, after Shmad is destruction. So after a total destruction, they gather together, and now they're naming the remains of the rabbis. And in the back of our heads, we have to think of the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai, and says, really? That's all that is left from two flourishing schools of Torah. They're actually naming them. If they would have named the rabbis in the time of Hillel and Shammai, we would be sitting here. We would need all the time of Rabbi Matt's class in order to name all the rabbis. So those are the only ones that remain. It's a handful. I don't think that there's not even two hands that you can count here of rabbis. So that's what they're saying to us. That's how this begins. That's the situation. That's the post-traumatic place where we are at.
Yeah.
Yes, it's heartbreaking when you read the texts about what was prior to that. And then what's the next thing, please?
They sent to the elders of the Galilee, saying, whoever has learned, let him come and teach. Whoever has not learned, let him come and learn. They gathered and learned, and they took care of all of their needs.
So what happened?
They got together and went ahead.
But what's the difference between this and Hillel and Shammai?
They learn from each other.
There's one tent.
Yeah.
There are no two schools anymore. that there's one big tent and they invite everybody. Okay, if you're thinking on Jewish Louisville, you invite everyone. You say we'll all come to learn together. Okay, they're not saying that they pray together, but at least we'll all come to learn together. And look how they phrase it. That they came and they learned from each other. They actually listened. Those are people who didn't agree about anything with one another. They actually listened and learned from each other and created a community where everyone was teachers and students, and that they did not push away someone because of their opinion or because they were too radical or any of that. Everyone is invited because it's a time of crisis, and then a miracle happens. What happens in this community? What's the bottom line that we have? What's the ending punchline there?
They took care of all their needs together.
What does that mean? They took care of all their needs.
Well, all of the disagreements and learning from one another, they got together and forced ahead instead of dwelling. I don't know.
So they learned. What does it mean? They took care of all their needs. What does that literally mean?
They lived together.
They survived.
Or they went ahead.
I think that it's more than survive. Can any of us, regarding of politics? Yes, Carol. Carol Penner, you want to say something?
Not good yesterday. I'll check in later. No, I mean, they don't have any day help, so she's.
Benji,
Doesn't cut out of the.
There we go.
thank you. What does it mean they took care of all their needs?
They have.
Yes.
It kind of brings to mind Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I know that they probably weren't thinking about that. That was like a concept that came a couple thousand years after the fact. But to me, it kind of brings to mind, starting with the needs of food, and then shelter, and then community.
Anyone else? I think you're correct. I mean, I agree with you that they didn't know the term that you just used, but it's not about their intellectual needs. So what are they trying to tell us when the rabbis are saying that community of learners that learn together was able to take care of all their needs?
They healed together.
They healed together.
Yeah.
What else could it mean?
They can move forward now. Instead of just completely disagreeing or arguing one way or the other, they've gotten together and they took care of the things that have to be taken care of. We think of food and housing, but whatever needs at that point, together they worked. That's what I feel. They now together could work toward future for benefits. That's what I think.
Thank you. Kylie?
Not just to exist and survive, but to mingle and talk to each other and move forward and thrive, not just get up the next day and, like Arlene says, to move forward and to thrive and be a good community.
I think I might be, yes, please, Ron.
They shared resources to ensure that every person's needs were addressed, not just theirs or one person's, but they shared resources for everybody.
Which, did I miss anyone that wanted to? Yes, please.
They focused on more than just the intellectual when they were interacting with each other. They focused on the entirety of existence.
So I'll say something. Yes, please.
To me, it implies an intention of community, and not just community, but of a higher power, a higher need of the intention of we all have to take care of each other. So we are coming here not just because, in moments of crisis, right? But look at 9/11, like a day, everybody was like nice to each other and that falls apart. This seems like that was the intent, like that moment with that intention of keeping that moment going. We are here. We have to take care of each other, not just like we want to. There's some kind of have another one about the intention. Covenant's intention.
Yes.
The covenant, to me, this implies more of an intention to build something together.
To me, it remains rather vague because we're interpreting through our eyes and experiences what those needs were, and they don't define it. So I agree they came together as a community. That's what they were able to achieve, meeting the needs as that community established them. But what's still unspoken, unwritten, and unknown to us are, what are those needs? Are those the same as we would define coming together today? So it still leaves it open.
So
we think about it.
obviously, we read those texts through our eyes. That there's no doubt. I don't think that anybody here lived in the second and the third century to be there. And obviously, we interpret them through what we have. And I think that you're correct that they leave it vague, but they do say in the text, the Hebrew says, "V'asu kol tzorchehen," that they took care of all their needs. One of the most frustrating things that I do from time to time is to go to visit Jewish family and career services. You are about to be depressed. That they tell the students that we bring there, the confirmation student and the sixth and seventh and eighth grades, about the unmet need here in Jefferson County. How many food banks are there? How many families that don't have enough food are they? How many children? They go on. It's like half an hour of like, wow.
It's important to depress children.
There are so many needs that we do not meet, that we're trying, and Jewish Family and Career Services is really trying, but it's definitely not enough. There are a lot of needs that are not met in our society. And here, and again, you're right, we don't know what they mean by that, but they have the I don't know, courage or chutzpah, whatever to say, they took care of all their needs. All their needs were met. I never heard of a society that all their needs have met. This is definitely a description of an ideal society. Now, I want to share what I read of that. They're building a big tent where everyone is invited as teachers and as students. This is very dangerous thing to do. There are a lot of places that invites everyone as students. There are not a lot of places that invites people of all ways of thought to be actually teachers. But here they're saying it's teachers and students. And then it becomes a community that you learn from one another. And to them, it's a community built on chesed, on devotion, on love and kindness, on caring and compassion. When I'm really willing to learn from Avery, and Avery is really, sorry for picking on you, and Avery is really willing to learn from me. No. No. That means that I make myself vulnerable. I am saying I'm really willing to enrich myself and my being from what Avery is. And what they're describing is that it's mutual, that everybody is saying that. And what I think they're saying is that this ability to obligate yourself to literally learn from each other, people that are coming from different places and people that are invited from different places, can create a community of chesed that would actually be able to take care of all the needs of each other, because you really care. because it's not just to do a V, how do you say, to do a check that I did the minimum that I got. You really are trying to do something. I think it's a really radical idea, a house of learning where everyone is invited and is open to everyone.
I've got a question. It does sound like a very radical idea, and so I'm not asking for an answer right now. I'm just asking this as a question. What happens when the people refuse to honor each other?
Oh, that's great, because that's the next text.
Okay.
Thank you. So far it worked. Everybody, do you want to say something about this text before we go?
I want to, I think we'll have time when we do the next text, because they tie in together and it feeds in with things I want to mention.
So the next text is a horrific text. It's a horrible text. It's a very long text. I think even in what we've brought, it's even longer there. It's when you have all the good intentions, but the Bet Midrash, the house of learning, actually gets corrupt. And it gets corrupt exactly because of what you said. That the people in power, Rabban Gamliel, they really don't like Rabban Gamliel. He's their president, and they really don't like his use of power. And he keeps offending the rabbi that we read about before that. He keeps offending Rabbi Yoshua. He really keeps offending. And at the end, they're going to unthrone him. How do you say that? They're going to take him down. Okay, dethrone him.
Yeah.
So let's read. You know what? Let's start and read it, and then we'll see how much we can read without taking from Rabbi's mat time. Megan, do you want to read, maybe?
Oh, sure. They said, how long will he continue afflicting them? Last year on Rosh Hashanah, he afflicted him. Regarding the firstborn and the incident of Rabbi Zadok, he afflicted him. Here too, he is afflicting him. Let us remove him.
Okay, now there are 3 pages of all the grievances against Rabban Gamliel that he's speaking. He was really offending them. And then let's see what happens as a result of moving him and what's the fix that they do, please.
It was taught on that day they dismissed the guard at the door, and permission was granted to the students to enter. As Rabban Gamliel would proclaim and say, any student who inside whose inside are not like his outside will not enter the study hall. On that day, several benches were added. Rabbi Yohanan said, Abba Yosef ben Dastai and the rabbis disputed this. One said 400 benches were added, and one said 700 benches were added. Rabban Gamliel was disheartened. He said, perhaps, heaven forbid, I prevented Israel from Torah.
So the first thing that they do is what? What's that? They dethrone him. He's not the president anymore. And what's the first thing that they do? They fire the security. There's no security at the door anymore. Now, why did they have security? They didn't have a threat of safety or anything. Why do they have security? To prevent whom to enter? If you remember, there's a psalm, a beautiful psalm. Johanna probably remembers it by heart. There's like a checkpoint before coming to Jerusalem. And they're saying only if you never took bribes, all you said was true, everything that you do is really perfect, you're allowed to go to the mountain of God. Otherwise, you're not welcome. Now it's theoretical, but he really had a guard. And he would say, is your outside and your inside actually matching? I don't even know what that means. Okay. Your inside is like your outside. I guess it's like what you say you actually do, that you walk the walk. And what happens when they dismiss that policing at the entrance of the house of study? They're arguing whether every bench, it's not chairs, it's benches. Every bench has 8 seats. So they're arguing actually how many thousands of students added there. It's not really, it cannot be, but they're making it legendary. Okay, he was prevented thousands of people from studying Torah. Do we want to stop here? Because we really are running.
Yeah, because there's two things I want to mention here, and it ties back in with the Song of Songs, Rabbi, which is that, first of all, there's a fairly new study. It's about a year old from Tulane University and Rosoff Consulting on American Judaism and financial security. And we can get into we can argue about how they define financial security, but 18% of American Jews are financially unstable, which is not that's not the stereotype of the American Jews. But this study did research both, for example, with Sandy from our food pantry, who provides some of the services to Jewish community that has food insecurity, but also with some of the clients throughout the country. And what it found was that individuals who had financial insecurity were less likely to participate in Jewish activities, regardless of whether or not the temple had a pay the dues that you feel like you can afford to pay policy, or the Federation gave financial aid, or whatever it is, that American Jews begin to disengage from their Jewish community, not because others are shaming them, but we presume the shame that they feel because they're not matching up to whatever that is. So when we think about building a tent and getting rid of the security so that everybody can come into the tent, I think it's very important to be thinking about what that community can look like if we reduce those barriers and we share in a way that people do not need to feel. And I'm not suggesting a socialist overthrow of the government and that everybody gets the same amount of money all the time. But there are ways that we can approach our neighbors and encourage people to participate in conversations in a way that people do not feel disengaged. Because as people feel disengaged, one is the issue that it does to our own identity, and two is the issue that it does to the community, the Jewish community. As fewer and fewer people feel engaged, what happens to the Jewish community? And that brings us back in many ways to the conversation of civil discourse, the year of civil discourse. If I can pontificate for one more moment and just say that I had an opportunity to sit in on some trainings that this national group is doing that we're having brought in to help through the trainings in November. And to Fran's question, the trainings are all about how to engage in conversations without shutting other people out. Because again, it's not about proving, it's very much about how you have that open tent. It's not about proving one side right or the other side right. It's about having a conversation, a genuine conversation, not a, you said this, but I'm going to say this, but hearing people and connecting to people. And you worry about who's right some other time.
So I just want to conclude and say something in favor of our tradition and our sacred scriptures. I'm thinking of the courage of the rabbis, and I'm thinking of what Fran said, to create that ideal, to put on the table that ideal, but to also say, from time to time we screwed it up. They're not saying it could be screwed up. They're saying we screwed it up. We did, and for the rabbis there's a whole page there that Rabban Ben Gamliel almost died from the thought that he actually prevented Torah from the people of Israel. There's nothing worse than you can do than you being blamed of preventing Torah from the people of Israel. And it's clear that that's what he did. I mean, it's in your face that that's what he did. He almost dies of grief over his own actions. And the rabbis are saying, and again, it's just a story, but they're saying this can happen. This is not an easy thing to create. but we are trying to create an alternative to a religious community that is not about justice, and it's not about feeling that you are so right that you're willing that your ideas and your ideals will bang us into the rock. That's what they're saying. That's their imagery, that you walk with your ideas into the mountain and you just crush there. But to create a community that is based on a different idea, not on justice and why I'm always right and just, but on acts of chesed, of love and kindness and devotion and caring. Thank you all. And Rabbi Matt is coming.
It's your.
I think there's one right here.
I would say
I agree with that.
I really don't care about things. I don't care what you're saying.
But anyway, did everything. These are better.
It's really pretty and it takes me forever, but I'm gonna do a picture of it. Oh my God. I'm not sure. I have you know.
So there you go.
That's the thing that I did. Absolutely appreciate that. I know, they were like, dude, I want to come in here. And then, thank you. Please made it. Were you? Okay.
I love a power.
Like, oh, I guess I did.
It's in the gear for. Last time.
So I'm saying like, I know, it's like ridiculous to say, there's a break between 2:30. Right. And then at 2:30, the afternoon service on the 3:30, then at 9, I guess there's if they break. That's great. 45, you know, there's 2 more services. And then they ruined the local 45, there's 5:30. It's a matter of dancing. But yeah, Michael wanted to mark up the survey. Yeah, I think yeah, you remember one of the frontiers, like, that's what I was going to say, kind of say. Oh, the current shoes, you know, up here. So I'm literally saying. I was thinking.
Do it. Okay. Welcome, everybody. So, on a day where we're spending the whole day thinking about right and wrong and forgiveness of sins, I wanted to spend some time on a topic that shows us that there's a lot more gray area in Jewish text and tradition and practice than we sometimes think. So what better way to do that than talk about Judaism, magic, and demons? It'll be a great time. We'll do it together. So can someone read that for me? Benji's got it.
Abracadabra.
Nice. Yes. So fun fact, abracadabra is actually Aramaic, right? So abara, I will create, kadabara, as I speak, right? So a little fun fact for you there. So let's start with big questions. What is magic? And we can think about either our modern context or the ancient world or anything in between. How would we define magic?
Something you don't understand.
Nice. Something you don't understand.
Rituals performed with the intention of something else occurring.
Ah, nice. Okay, so ritual performed in order to hopefully create a certain outcome. Sweet. Okay, okay. Nice. Okay, so there's something there that pushes the bounds of the natural order of things. Yeah.
I was just about to like using supernatural means to affect the natural world.
Nice. Yeah, very good. Do we know anything about magic and Jewish texts and tradition? We're going to look at a bunch, but I just want to know.
Dybbuk and the golem.
Yeah, Dybbuk and the golem. Nice. Okay. Solid. And we'll talk about both of those. So won't define them right now for you. A little mystery hanging in the air.
Moses and the snakes.
Yeah, nice. We're going to talk about that too. And we're going to try to define the boundary between magic and miracle. And at the start, what is the difference between miracles and magic?
I think miracle, something good comes out of it.
Miracle, something good comes out of it. Okay.
Magic is something that humans create.
Nice. So we have a distinction there. Magic is something that a human being can do, right? And a miracle is something that God can do, right? And we kind of see this distinction in the Hebrew language, right? Because if we go back to abracadabra, right? That bet resh aleph, that word to create, is a form of creation that only God can do, right? It's the very beginning of the Torah. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, right? At the start, God created the heavens and the earth. And then when we ask for peace, the very last section of the Kaddish, what do we say?
Oseh shalom.
Oseh shalom v'rama. Yep, oseh. So that's the other form of making, right? La'asot means to make. So oseh can be either a human being making something or God making something, but bara is something that only God can do. which is what makes this so fun, right? Because that sort of makes the person God in that instance. So some things to remember: magic and sorcery were both common in the ancient world. And astrology was kind of tied to both ritual and calendar, as well as magic. There was a whole sort of class of people that weren't quite priests. I guess they were early doctors, I guess. They would try to cure ailments with different rituals and potions and mixtures and things. We have a lot of dealing with demons in texts. And so as the text sort of gets passed down, right, it becomes a little more sanitized to take away some of the power of the demons and the other gods and things. But we still get little mentions of it. So we're going to see some of those remnants in the text that we have today. And one of the goals of magic is to influence the cosmos, right? So in the Torah, we have two specific mentions. So in Exodus 22:17, it says, "You shall not tolerate among you a sorceress." Anyone know what the punishment for being a sorcerer or sorceress was?
I'm gonna assume burning or stoning.
Yeah, death, for sure. Big death, big death. And then in Deuteronomy 18, "Let no one be found among you, one who is an augur, a soothsayer, a diviner, a sorcerer, one who casts spells, or one who consults ghosts or familiar spirits, or one who inquires of the dead." So what's going on in that one? Lots, yeah. Right? It's kind of an expansion of Exodus, which makes sense, right? Because Deuteronomy is sort of a retelling of essentially the whole Torah, but generally in Deuteronomy, what we'll get is an expansion on different laws or rules or forbidden things, and this is no exception. So we have different categories, right? Augur, soothsayer, diviner, sorcerer, one who casts spells, and one who consults ghosts. Lot going on there. In Genesis, so we have the realm of magic, right? And now we're going to talk about sort of the realm of divine beings, and then we're going to kind of put them together. So in Genesis 32, Jacob is alone by a stream at night, right? So at this point in the story, Jacob and Esau, Rabbi David so beautifully taught us this morning, were on their way to kill one another. And this is right before their sort of last fateful meeting, where Jacob assumes that he's going to see his brother Esau and his brother's going to kill him. So he sends his family off so that they can be further behind and be safe. And Jacob just sits alone by a stream. The story says that an Ish wrestles with him until dawn, but has to leave before dawn actually breaks. What is that word Ish in Hebrew? Yeah, man or person, right? In the picture there, what is Jacob wrestling with?
He looks like an angel.
Yeah, it looks like an angel, right? Like the classic sort of Western depiction of angels, which is not biblically accurate, but we'll let it slide. Yeah, and palm trees in the background. Yeah, it's nice. You get a little beach paradise and wrestling match.
Palm
Yeah.
trees and say, do they describe what angels look like in the
Yes,
book?
and they are terrifying. So if you Google just biblically accurate angel,
Hundreds of eyes, many faces,
Yeah.
little circles,
they're like orbs and
like
they
several sets of wings.
yeah. Yeah.
Really weird.
It's really terrifying, which makes sense now because anytime an angel appears to someone, the first words are, "Hey, don't be afraid."
Yeah.
Right? And like that doesn't make sense with our nice sort of Western depictions of beautiful angels and things. But when you see this giant orb with lots of eyes and wings that's glowing in front of you, it gets you freaked out a little. So the text says that Jacob wrestles with an Ish, right? So Ish literally means man or person, but there's lots of room for interpretation there, right? One of the interpretations is Jacob wrestles with an angel. Have we heard any other interpretations?
I thought the word for human was Adam.
Yes.
So I guess
There's
there's a
lots
reason
of-
why they used Ish.
Nice. Yes. Very good. So the word ish can be a lot of different things, whereas Adam or Ben Adam or Gever would have been specifically a human person. Ish leaves room, right? For angels. What other interpretations have we heard?
That God actually himself came down.
Yeah, that Jacob wrestles with God, right? And if we look Genesis 32:29, Jacob beats the Ish and is renamed Israel, one who struggles with God and survives, right? Because you're not supposed to be able to even see God's face and live, let alone actually wrestle with God, right? So we have, it was just a random person who was hanging out in the beautiful palm trees. We have an angel. It could have been God. What else? Huh?
Himself.
Himself. Yeah, definitely. It could have been him wrestling with himself. And there's one more option.
Esau.
Esau, yes. Nice. So it could have actually been Esau, right? They could have fought it out in the evening, and then Esau runs away, and when they finally meet, Jacob's like, okay, I see. Seeing you is like seeing the face of God, right? And so we get that really sort of beautiful reconciliation, which is nice because that moment where Jacob and Esau meet, they kind of break a couple of generations of trauma, right? Because in Genesis 22, Abraham almost sacrifices Isaac. Isaac never gets to see Sarah again. He doesn't really see Abraham again. He kind of reconnects with Ishmael, but not really. Then we have the whole Jacob and Esau thing, and this is the moment where that is kind of broken, and they're able to reconcile with one another.
When they do meet, and it's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah.
And they wept.
Yeah, they embrace one another. They actually kiss, and they're both weeping.
So I thought they kind of let go of all that animosity.
Exactly. Yes. Yep. So they break the cycle of the sort of intergenerational trauma for a little bit, and then we get into the whole Joseph story, and then it's
Jacob says it follows, he doesn't really.
yeah.
It's really
Right. No, absolutely. And one of the really cool things about this text too is there's lots of room for interpreting what the Ish is, but also it doesn't totally transform Jacob either, right? So Yaakov is renamed Yisrael, but the text doesn't land on Israel. It doesn't call him Israel every single time. Sometimes it'll call him Jacob, sometimes it'll call him Israel, right? So for the rest of his life, he's still continuing to wrestle with his identity. So in our text then, we have room for some magic, and we have some room for different divine beings of various levels. So let's talk about that line between magic and miracle. All right, so we have Moses and Aaron versus Pharaoh's magicians. One important thing, in Exodus 6:3, when Moses is in front of the burning bush, Moses asks God for a name. God gives him a couple of different names, right? El Shaddai, which is usually translated as God Almighty, but it literally means like the breasted God. There is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I will be what I will be. And then we finally get the Yud He Vav He, right? That secret name of God that we're not allowed to pronounce, and we don't actually know how it was pronounced. And that name of God, the Yud He Vav He, is actually every conjugation of the verb to be, right? So it's every form of being all at once. Why would God tell Moses God's name?
People are going to ask.
Right. Okay. So a level of validity, right? Okay. So what's this God? But if God has only given Moses that name, how would the people even verify that?
I guess it's God proving to Moses, like, okay, I prove to you that I do want a relationship with you. I'm gonna tell you a little secret.
Yeah, nice. Nice. Okay. So there's a level of vulnerability there. Yeah.
He also mentioned that I'm the God of your ancestors. So
Nice.
it shows a continuation.
Right. Yeah, yeah. There's that connectivity there from generation to generation.
There's power in language.
Yes, very good. Yes, there's power in language and power in name, right? When something really scary is happening, right? And you don't know what's causing it, you're more afraid of what you don't know than what's actually happening, right? And so by God giving Moses this secret name, God is being vulnerable to the point where Moses kind of has some agency over this God now, right? And it's a deeper relationship. So when we get to Exodus 7, God commands Moses and Aaron to repeat all that I command you, multiplying my signs and marvels in the land of Egypt. That's a pretty loaded sentence there, right? So repeat all that I command you. Okay, so follow directions. Got it. Multiplying my signs, which can also be translated as miracles, and marvels in the land of Egypt. That's a big step, right? Because we're going from, yeah, just follow my instructions to, yeah, you're going to do miracles. Oh, that gets tricky, right? So when Moses and Aaron go before Pharaoh, quick important point. When Moses says, let my people go, why? There's a reason given.
So that they can worship God in the desert.
Yeah, good. So that they can worship God in the desert. And they're actually initially not even asking for, when Moses is having the conversation with God at the burning bush, the initial request is for them to be freed for 3 days so that they can go have a holiday and worship God, right? And Moses takes that and says, no, let my people go all together so that we can go worship our God in our own way forever, right? So Moses actually pushes the boundary on that. But when they get up to Pharaoh, they have the whole, hey, let my people go. The first thing that happens is Aaron's rod turns into a serpent. So we get that in Exodus 7, verses 9 and 10. And we have a nice little piece of art there where we have snakes coming out of their hands. So Aaron's rod turns into a serpent. What about Pharaoh's magicians? Can they do that? Yeah, they can do it. Which is a little troubling, right? Because theoretically, what's happening is God is allowing Aaron to do this thing, right? This magic trick, these miracles. So how are Pharaoh's magicians doing it too?
Sleight of hand.
Sleight of hand. Could be.
But if we're all created in God's image, then not just the Israelites are able to do this.
Nice. So yes, and the and part is in the Exodus story, God takes sides, right? Which is really tough. And that's one of the reasons I love the Midrash. As the Israelites are leaving Egypt, right? The sea has split, they're walking through, they're singing their songs, and there's a Midrash that says that God actually yelled at them for singing. Like, oh, why are you celebrating? Some of my creation has just been destroyed in the sea, right? So recognizing that God does take sides sometimes, and it comes at a cost. And so if we as human beings are able to reconcile, then God doesn't have to intervene, right? So yes, theoretically, it could be God also doing it for them too. Why not?
I've heard an interpretation of this where it's very much about like the power play of showing that like the God of the Jewish people is stronger than the God of the Egyptian people. And it's all these feats of power that God can do that like their God cannot do.
Yes, perfect. So we get the rest of the plagues, right? Water to blood, frogs, lice, and Pharaoh's magicians are able to do most of them but not all of them. And right, so in the background, you're absolutely right. We have the God of Israel allowing Moses and Aaron to do these miracles, and we have the gods of Egypt allowing Pharaoh's magicians to perform their miracles or magic tricks. So really, we have sort of two layers of battle, right? We have sort of a magic off, and then we have gods fighting. And that's why when we have Micha Mocha Elim Adonai, who is like you among the other gods, Adonai, the answer is, well, none, because you saw what just happened back there. But there's something very important in that. There's the recognition of other gods, right? So even though the answer is, well, none are like you, but there are others, right? So in the Torah, we don't get solid monotheism, right? We get this sort of middle ground that's called monolatry, right? So polytheism, belief in many gods. Monotheism, there's just one God. Monolatry, there's lots of gods, but one of them is the best God, right? And so that's kind of where we land in the Torah. And it isn't until later texts that the next logical step is taken. Well, if one God is better than all the others, then the others aren't really gods, right? They're just heavenly whatevers. And so there's only one God, right? Yeah, please.
If God hardened Pharaoh's heart, do you think God had a hand in doing the Egyptian magic miracles?
Absolutely. I think there's plenty of room for that, right? One of the nice things about that interpretation is that it softens the God taking sides thing, right? Because in the story, there has to be a certain outcome, but God isn't, in this interpretation, totally favoring one over the other, right? There's still that hint that, oh, God is still participating in this this group's lives, right? And almost to equal measure, but it's like a 60-40, right? So yeah, 100%. There's room for all of that, and that's one of the very beautiful things about Torah, and one of the really difficult things about Torah is we have things like the Ish, or we have lots of things, lots of assumptions in the background that we can make and come up with beautiful interpretations, but that also leaves room for the text to be manipulated to serve certain biases, right? Next, one of my favorite stories, the Sorceress of Endor, also called the Witch of Endor. So we are in the book of 1 Samuel, which is after the Torah, right? So this is in the later section. Samuel is a prophet, and he dies, and he's buried in Ramah. Saul, the king of Israel, who relied entirely upon Samuel and his prophecies and knowledge and demeanor, seeks to know how to defeat the Philistines, but doesn't receive help in dreams or from prophets. So what does that tell us about prophecy?
It's not reliable.
Nice. It's not reliable. Solid.
It's selective.
Selective. Very good. How does it come through? At least according to 1 Samuel 28:6.
Sorcerer.
Yeah, nice. So it comes through in dreams or from prophets, right? There's some sort of intermediary thing to facilitate it, whether it's a dream or a person, right? And in this case, Saul wasn't having dreams, and there was no other reliable prophet because Samuel had died. So in 1 Samuel 28:7-25, we get this really cool story. So Saul is terrified. He's about to go to war, and he has no idea what to do. So he seeks out this sorceress, and he disguises himself, and he goes to her house, and he's like, hey, I need you to do something for me. And she's like, absolutely not. The king's made that illegal. I'm not going to bring up a spirit for you. Just not going to happen. He's like, well, no, it'll be fine. Don't worry. The king won't find out. And she's like, no, and he's like, no, really, trust me. It's fine. And she's like, okay. So she she brings up the spirit of Samuel, right? Or I say spirit, but I don't know. It just says that Samuel sort of comes forth, right? And so we don't know exactly what was it, his physical being, his physical likeness? Was it just a spiritual one? Whatever it was recognizable to both Saul and to the sorceress. And she's like, buddy, you outlawed this, but okay, fine. And then anyone happen to know what the first thing the ghost of Samuel does? He yells at Saul. He yells at Saul. He just tells him to essentially stop being so dumb. You can figure this out. So it's really fun, but this weird story that only it's less than an entire chapter long. It tells us a lot about a couple of different realms of thought at this period, right? So we have death and afterlife, right? Because Samuel or the spirit or the being or the essence, whatever it is, of Samuel is able to come up and have a conversation with Saul, right? So there's still some consciousness there. There's still some agency there. There just has to be a facilitation between sort of the realms of wherever Samuel is in death and where Saul is in the physical world. It also tells us about prophecy, right? Prophecy is something that happens both in our world and comes from another realm. So it's a really weird story, and it doesn't actually like define anything for us. It really just complicates things. It's fun. Next, we're going to get into some demons. So, Lilith. Has anyone heard of Lilith? Yeah, sweet. Okay. Yes. Okay. How do I? Uh-oh. Why is it? There we go. Okay. Sorry. I need to re-share screen with a different.
You got a demon in that computer.
What's up?
There's a demon in that computer.
You're probably right. Thank God I've already printed my sermons. So in Isaiah 34, Isaiah is talking about a period of peace that will eventually come, right? So thorns shall grow up in its places. So peace, and then some troubling times if the people do not heed Isaiah's warning, essentially. So in this section, right, this is right after some of the peace section. Thorns shall grow up in its palaces, nettles and briars in its strongholds. It shall be a home of jackals, an abode of ostriches. Interesting choice. Wildcats shall meet hyenas. Goat demons shall greet each other. There too the Lilith shall repose and find herself a resting place. Yeah, the Lilith.
Why is it unique? In my Torah, it has a footnote. It says Lilith is a kind of demon.
Yeah.
Not a specific demon.
Right. So, in one word, we have a whole history of demonology, right? So, the backstory of Lilith, right? Lilith was Adam's first helpmate, but she wanted to be equal to Adam, right? She did not want to be sort of subservient to him. And for that, she gets cast out of the garden. And she becomes literally demonized in the rabbinic literature, right? So she becomes this demon, and they do everything that they can to make her the worst type of demon. Yeah, so she eats babies. Yeah, right. Like,
Isn't there a telling of Lilith's story that says she was also made of the earth, like Adam? So therefore, she was.
She was, yeah.
What was that, Midrash, or is that Torah?
Is that?
That's Midrash.
Yeah,
It's
not canon.
Important distinction, right? So this is Midrash, which is a genre of literature where the rabbis notice holes in the text or problems with the text, and they fill it in with story. And then a lot of times those stories take on a life of their own, right? Like if you ask people, ask just a random person, is the story of Abraham smashing his father's idols in the Torah? You'll probably get the answer, yeah, that's in there, right? But it's not. No, it's Midrash. It's one of these stories that has become so popular that it sort of becomes Torah in its own way. So the story of Lilith, right? Yes. So the initial story, and this is why we have layers, they're created at the same time. They are both completely equal beings. But then Adam wants to be higher on the, I don't know, the pole, I guess. And so tries to make her subservient, and then the text demonizes her, right? And so there's actually the opportunity for a really beautiful lesson in equality there. But we don't quite get there, unfortunately. So then we get hundreds, if not thousands of years of demonization of this woman becoming a demon and then becoming the worst type of demon, right? The type of demon that instead of giving life, right, producing babies, becomes an eater of consumer of babies, right? So that's kind of how that happens.
Do you think that's part of why we have so much misogyny? Because so many of the religions come from Judaism, Judaism,
So I think
I wouldn't say misogyny.
We can't hear over here.
She said
No.
it's for me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, I just asked about the origins of misogyny with reference to this story.
So
I think that was dudes just interpreting it the way they wanted to interpret it.
Right.
I think that was God doing.
I think it's the opposite way. I think that the misogyny that existed in the society at the time informed how they wrote that midrash.
Yeah.
Definitely the opposite.
Right.
I think Lilith was like an older figure from Mesopotamia, right?
Probably, yeah. I mean, we do see Lilith mentioned outside of specifically sort of Hebrew literature. And so that's an important point too, because some of the names of God that we use, like El, was actually a Canaanite god, right? Or Baal, or like some of these other names that we refer to God, right, are actually names of other gods that have been sort of co-opted into the Jewish I don't know, cosmology, I guess. So when you have the name of a Canaanite god, and that name becomes just the generic word for God, that God loses its power, it loses its agency, right? Because when people are saying, oh, El or Elohim or Adonai Elohim, right? Ah, okay, so the Yud He Vav He is Elohim, is El, so that El doesn't exist. Right? Do we see these layers of language? Right. And so I'm not ever gonna pretend to say I understand the rabbis fully. I don't think any of us in the modern in our modern context can know exactly what they were thinking and why they wrote it. But in their worldview, I don't think they were trying to demonize all women, right? Or make all women subservient. And we see that in discussions around halakha, right? Around practice. So women, according to the rabbis, are exempt from doing certain things, specifically around time-bound mitzvot or commandments, right? The text doesn't say at all that women can't do those things. It just says women are exempt, right? And so in that particular worldview, the rabbis are saying, because in this specific society, women have these time-bound duties to children, to family, to all of these things, that they don't have to do some of these religious obligations to pile on top of that. Now, in our modern context, that's still ridiculous, right? Like that's still separate but equal in some ways. It is, well, you don't have to, you can't, right? So our modern interpretation allows for the informed choice, but I think you're right. They were kind of just dealing with the worldview that they had at the time. And if we look at the Torah in its context, right, the Torah itself, even though we as modern readers have a lot of problems with a lot of the things in there, it was actually a very progressive and a progressive document for its time.
If you want a memory about Lilith, is anybody in the audience old enough to remember the Lilith Fair music festivals in the late 90s?
Yeah.
All led by and only women's bands.
Nice.
Rabbi Matt.
Yeah.
Since names tend to have meaning in Hebrew, but this one
Mm-hmm.
comes from another language, what is the root of it, or does it mean something?
So it's related to Lila, right, which means night, so Lilith. And that is why we get a lot of stories about demons, specifically Lilith, right, appearing to people at night, right, because there's that sort of association. And so one of the interpretations of the Jacob wrestling with the Ish is that it was actually a demon, right, because he's down by the water at night, the time and place that demons like to hang out, apparently, and he wrestles with it, right? But that's also an interesting interpretation because he gets renamed by this thing and he gets blessed by this thing. In Shabbat 151b, yes, chapter 151, part B, in the Talmud, we have a discussion. So the whole thing is about Shabbat, but it's never just about that one thing. So we are in a lengthy discussion about how we treat dead bodies on Shabbat. Very exhilarating. Rav Papa said, "We hold that a lion does not pounce upon two people." The Gemara challenges this, but how can that be? Don't worry, a lot of this isn't going to make sense, but it doesn't need to right now. Just roll with it for a minute. We see that it does pounce upon two people. The Gemara answers, that statement of Rav Papa must be in accordance with that which Rami Bar Abba said. An animal does not overpower a person until he appears to it as an animal, as it is stated. But man does not abide in honor. He is like beasts that perish. Psalm 49. However, animals do not attack people who are human in their spiritual character. In a similar vein, Rabbi Hanina said, it is prohibited to sleep alone in a house, and anyone who sleeps alone in a house will be seized by Lilith.
Okay.
Yeah. So Talmud is fun. So how did we get here? Very short. So the rabbis go from how do you honor Shabbat? What happens if someone dies on Shabbat? Can you save someone's life on Shabbat? Okay, you couldn't save their life, so they're dead. How do you treat the body on Shabbat? Wait, we were just talking about danger. How did this person die? Here we get to danger, right? So we have all of these layers of discussion and kind of bouncing around. And that's what makes Talmud study so difficult, is there are like 100 layers of assumed knowledge that you know where they're going and why they're going there and what all of this means. So essentially what they're talking about here is the responsibility that someone has to not place themselves in danger, especially if it's right before Shabbat. Because if you're willingly and knowingly putting yourself in danger right before Shabbat, if Shabbat falls and you're in danger, you're potentially asking someone else to break Shabbat to save you. So do you see how we got there now? All right, cool. Yes. That's probably about like 50 chapters of Shabbat there for you. So good job. You've done it, everyone. Right. So it is prohibited to sleep alone in a house, and anyone who sleeps alone in a house will be seized by Lilith. Right. So even in situations where we feel like we may be safe, right, there's always a little bit of danger present. And then we just go on to a completely different thing, right? It was also taught, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, perform mitzvot. Well, you still find opportunities. So they're really good at jumping around. So, but it's just interesting that out of all of the things they could have chosen, they chose Lilith in a house alone. right? So clearly, who's the original? So Rabbi Hanina is just afraid of the dark.
And women.
And women, yeah.
Thinking the dark.
Women in the dark, that's it. Yes, absolutely.
Can I just,
Yeah.
according to my brother, who's a strictly Orthodox guy, had a heart attack on Shabbat. He was commanded to dial 911 instantly.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. So, about towards the beginning of the discussion around Shabbat, there is a whole discussion around the idea of pikuach nefesh, right? The protection of life. And so the rabbis come up with 15 or so examples, really extreme examples of someone needing to break Shabbat in order to save a life, right? And they even go as far as asking what counts as a life, right? So they have insane examples of like a baby being in danger, right? Where this literally 2-day-old baby is in mortal danger, right, from being attacked or something. And the question is, can you break Shabbat to save that baby's life? Because that baby is not responsible for mitzvot because it's not a bar mitzvah yet, right? And so they have like all of these discussions because what are the rabbis trying to do with the Talmud?
Confuse us?
Yes.
Interpret God's will.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So they're trying to essentially forge a new version of Judaism, right? Because we have the destruction of the Second Temple, and we go from a priestly cult to a rabbinic text-based tradition. So how do you make a text-based tradition take hold when you don't have a central power, a central economy, right? Because the temple was the economic power, it was the social power, it was the religious power, it was all in one spot. And you had a hierarchy, a whole caste system of priests and Levites and Israelites, and all that is gone. No more centralization of power, no more sacrifice. So what do? Well, you have to create an entirely new worldview, right? So what the rabbis are doing is they're taking everything that was and saying, these are just categories of practice, right? And so as we're creating new categories, if we just say, okay, pikuach nefesh, you can protect life no matter what. Well, that leaves a lot of room for interpretation, right? And then the question becomes, well, if you can save a life on Shabbat, well, then why are there any limitations on Shabbat, right? And so you have to create all of these sort of categories of people and things to try to make them fit neatly. And the rabbis recognize that they don't fit neatly, even in the Talmud, right? Including when it comes to gender, right? So men are in one group, women are in another group, and you sort of do that. Oh, wait, there are people that fall in between those, right? Okay, so let's have the androgynous section too. Well, what do we do with that? Okay, well, now we need to look at all of these different categories of things that can happen and how gender or gender identity can play into how we respond to that, right? So pikuach nefesh, then, we have all of these discussions of what is the most insane example that could never happen, but we're going to talk about it anyways, just to see if the rule sticks. And it does, right? So that's how they come up with new rules, is they push it as far as it can possibly go, and then further, and they're like, yeah, okay, even in this scenario, pikuach nefesh, right? It works. And protection of life is all life. Doesn't matter if it's a baby. It doesn't matter if it's a stranger in the community. It doesn't matter if it's your family member. All of that is treated as equal, and you can break the holiest day of the week, Shabbat, you can completely desecrate it to save that life, because that life is more sacred.
And we're only talking about human life right here.
We are.
What about the dog?
Yeah. So you have to remember, they're coming out of a sacrificial worldview, right?
True.
Where the
But
life
we're
of
definitely only speaking about human
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Although I would include animals too, for sure. Let's see. Okay, we got like 12 minutes. Let's see if we can get there. Share.
I have a quick question.
Please.
I'm so sorry. I'm
Why?
gonna kind of
Don't-
backtrack.
this is
Within one
literally
of
what
the
we're here
first slides, it was said something about prohibiting or do not deal with a sorceress.
Yep.
So I'll deal with the sorceress.
Yeah, you shall not tolerate among you a sorceress. What was the exact Hebrew word that was said there, and was it feminine?
That is a great question. I know it's feminine. Let me
Like,
stop
what if you got a
sharing.
dude doing magic? Is that okay?
If what?
If you got a dude, a guy,
No,
a
it's
man.
not. So when we go to when we have the Deuteronomy text,
Yeah.
it specifically says dudes too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just was like,
Tanakh, hold on, let me find the word for it.
Why do I only get drills?
22:17. So we are in Exodus 22:17. So yes, it's feminine.
okay.
Can you pronounce the word?
Yep. Here, and I can show it to you as well. So it is this word right here, mechashifa. So literally, sorceress, no techayeh, tolerates the nice one, l'chaim, right? Life.
Yeah.
So a sorceress, no shall live. Literally, like if we want to translate it exactly, a sorceress, no shall live, right? Or no shall she live, because we have the feminine there as well. Yeah, that's it. Because right before it, right, we have the not so great things about relationships. And if a man seduces a virgin for whom the bride price has not been paid and he lies with her, he must take her as his wife. As bride price, not great. Father refuses to give her to him. He must still weigh out in silver in accordance with the bride price for virgins. You shall not tolerate a sorceress. Whoever lies with the beast shall be put to death. Right? Yeah. So it's just all funny stuff. Yeah.
Very, yeah.
Covering all the bases.
So a sorcerer is okay, not a sorceress.
No.
No. So initially, well, right. So in Exodus, it's the feminine because you wouldn't want to call Moses and Aaron sorcerers, right? But in Deuteronomy, when we are retelling the story, yes. So an augur, a soothsayer, a diviner, a sorcerer, the masculine sorcerer, same word, but sorcerer. One who casts spells or consults ghosts, right? Fun stuff. None of them shall live. So it's not just the women. Okay.
And what about talking donkeys?
There you go. Well, it depends if the talking donkey is offering prophecy or not. So let's take a quick trip to Qumran. The community there was called the Yachad, which means the together ones. They were a sect of Jews that sort of separated themselves during the Second Temple period, and they lived in the caves right near the Dead Sea. They were active between the last 3 centuries before the Common Era and the 1st century of the Common Era, so they were around for quite a while. They were really concerned with purity and Olam Haba, the world to come, and the reason they left is they felt that the temple was not serving its purpose anymore, that there was too much impurity and bribery and things weren't happening right there. So they decided to make their own sort of community where they could, although they couldn't offer sacrifices, they could be the purest versions of themselves as possible. They were driven off by the Romans after the destruction of the Second Temple, and as they knew that trouble was brewing, right, they decided to hide all of their manuscripts in little pots and put them in the very back of the caves there in hopes that they would be able to come back soon and retrieve them. That didn't happen. So there were 981 manuscripts discovered beginning in 1946 and 7 by local Bedouins, right? The story is that a Bedouin farmer threw a stone into one of the caves just to see if there were any animals or anything in there. He hears some pottery shatter. It's like, oh, that's wild. Goes in, finds a bunch of scrolls and pots and things, brings them to a local antique dealer, and eventually they are discovered by scholars and sort of collected. They are the second oldest known surviving manuscripts of works canonized in Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, with notable extra biblical writings and community-specific texts. So they had things like the War Scroll, they had the Community Rule, they had different sort of versions of some of the books that we have. Some of the documents, and that actually is a picture of one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of the documents contain exorcisms, healing, and protection against demons. So,
There is the Dead Sea Scrolls?
oh yeah, this is Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is it. This is it. And then divination via zodiology and astrology, right? So they recognize that they are not prophets, but through zodiology and astrology, they can tap into that prophetic nature.
And are they in Hebrew or Aramaic?
Both. Yes, we have a nice little mix, and the I'll pull up a high definition
Rabbi,
photo.
were the scrolls written in Aramaic or Hebrew?
Both. Both.
Oh,
So we have a nice mix.
sorry.
Yep. Oh no, you're good. You're good. So we have a nice mix, and the handwriting is not your standard block Hebrew handwriting, so it's also very difficult to read the letters and the words, and there's lots of chunks missing. So let's hear a little section of. So these come from 4Q, so it's the fourth cave. Piece parchment 510 and 511. So the first one, they shall rejoice in God. And then we have some holes for the instructor. The second song, as to frighten those who terrify, is straying through humiliations, but not for eternal destruction. God in the secret of the Almighty Shaddai, his, and then there's a hole, he shall hide me. There's another hole, with his holy ones, together with his saints, giving thanks to God. For in the houses of their glory they shall be united. You are the God of the gods. So it doesn't quite make sense because we don't have the whole thing, right? There's holes in the text, which is really unfortunate because there's some wild things in there, and I wish we had the whole thing. But we don't. But here, some of the language that they choose to use is very interesting, right? So there's this idea of being hidden and protected, and then ending with "You are the God of the gods." That's cool. This one's fun. So fragment 10, spirits of the destroying angel, spirits of the bastards, demons, Lilith, howlers, and desert dwellers. And there's a hole in the text. And those which fall upon men without warning to lead them astray from a spirit of understanding. They too were afraid of women. And to make their heart and there's a hole, desolate during the present dominion of wickedness and the predetermined time of humiliations for the sons of light. So they have this whole war, this spiritual war going on, the sons of light versus the sons of darkness, and their purity and their worship strengthens the sons of light. Let's see, sons of light, by the guilt of the ages of those smitten by iniquity, not for eternal destruction, but for an era of humiliation for transgression, right? So even these doesn't have hell developed yet, right? We don't have this eternal damnation. Sing for joy, O righteous ones, for the God of wonder. The psalms of his glory are for the upright. Let all who are blameless exalt him with lyre and salvation. And then we get into like a regular psalm, right? So we have kind of a magical formula, and then we get into a regular psalm.
What is the howler?
Great question. We don't. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be anything that howls, right? Because
A lot of things howl.
yes, and they're all dangerous,
Yeah.
generally.
Yeah.
In the wild, at least. Yeah, so it's really just talking about anything that presents danger, whether it be physical or spiritual. So here's the actual what we just read. That's what. Yeah. Yeah. So Yeah. Uh-huh. It's amazing that we can gather that much from it. So, and then really quick in 2 minutes, the golem. Yes. Yes. So, animated anthropomorphic being created from mud, created by those close to divinity. The golem is traditionally unable to speak, and it's never fully human or animal. It's a special class of controlled being. And it brought to life through incantation or recitation of God's names with particular words said in a particular way at a particular time. And it's usually deactivated by removing part of or an entirety of the name, right? So the classic story is it has the word emet, which means truth, written on its forehead or on some sort of chain around its neck. And if you detach the aleph, right, it becomes mate, which is death, right? So it's deactivated.
Do golem have a nefesh?
So that's a good question. Let's look at this. Verse 16 from Psalm 139, the only biblical mention of golems that we have. My unformed body, galmi, was seen by your eyes. Its entirety was recorded in your book. In due time, they were formed, all of them. So we don't quite have full nefesh there, right? Full soul, which means it's kind of just a shell of something.
There's a book in this library called Snow in August.
Okay.
It's fiction. Read it. It's a fun about colors.
Nice. All right, give me just an extra 30 seconds. Pirkei Avot 5, right? Ethics of the Ancestors, number 5. There are 7 characteristics of a golem, and there are 7 in a wise man. A wise man does not speak before one who is greater than he in wisdom and does not interrupt his friend's speech. He is not hasty to answer, asking what is relevant and answering to the point. He speaks his first point first and his first point last. Concerning things he has not heard, he says, I have not heard, acknowledging the truth. The reverse is true of the golem, right? So for the sages, right, golem is less of a like mythical creature thing and more of just someone they want to call dumb, essentially. Then we get sort of the creation. So during creation, the day was 12 hours long, the division on the day which Adam was created. The first hour, his dust was gathered. The second, a golem was made. So we have the shell. Third, his limbs were defined. Fourth, a soul was thrust into him. Fifth, he stood on his legs. The sixth, he was given speech and called the creatures of the earth names. Right, so golem is that physical being that's before full personhood. Because for the rabbis, a ball of flesh does not become a person until it breathes in that nefesh, right? That soul, that ruach. And then we have throughout history some fun in the 15th and 16th century, golems being created to protect the Jewish community from harms. And to close, I would like to argue that Captain America is a modern version of the golem because, so it's created by 2 Jews, right? Jack Kirby and Joe Simon during the period of World War II. Both were children of immigrants from Europe with parents who loved Ashkenaz folklore, so they knew the story of the golem. Let's see. The golem was a precursor to superhero stories, right? Character created to save the community in peril. Golem's created out of clay. Captain America is created out of the raw material that was the small Steve Rogers. Golem is created through incantations by a rabbi. Captain America is created in a lab by Dr. Reinstein, Albert Einstein. The golem was created to protect the Jews in Poland from pogroms. Captain America was created to defeat Hitler and the Nazis. Emet on the forehead of the golem, the letter A or Aleph on the helmet of Captain America, and Captain America's weapon of choice is a Magen David, a shield, right? So there you go. Thanks for spending some time with me.
Oh, that's that person.
Now we get to pray more.
I love it.
Yay!
Yeah.